Have you always thought to yourself, what would it be like to be a walking disco ball of death? What's good, folks? It's WARFRAME here with a new WARFRAME video coming at you with the new and improved Nuke Mirage that actually scales pretty well. Now, what is Mirage usually known for? Well, her Eclipse. I can just bring out my weapons and nuke things with the weapons. True, but I can just use my second ability, but has really terrible scaling. I mean, it's okay in Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, but once you get to Steel Path, yikes. What if I tell you can nuke in both ESO and Steel Path and actually have the damage scaled pretty well? This build did exist quite a while back, and I did do a whole video with several Mirage builds. But what if I told you it got improved thanks to the Whispers in the Wall update? All because of one mod. Our main DPS ability here today is going to be Prism. Prism is Mirage's fourth ability. You throw out a disco ball that spins around, shooting out rays of light that deals damage to any enemy in sight. Now, there's an issue with this ability. You throw it out and it travels on its own and has weird physics sometimes because you can find it floating into nothingness away from enemies. So then it's just left out there as it drains your energy. Because yes, this ability has a drain per second. As you can see right there. Here's another thing. This ability has three forms of scaling, coming from your strength, meaning more strength that you put into your build, the more damage it will deal. And then you have your light surrounding. Mirage is all about lights. So if you're in a bright area, it's going to deal more damage. And then your third scaling is startup damage. As you cast Prism and have it deal damage, it will store up some damage and release it to enemies. This stored up damage will disappear when your Prism expires or when you prematurely detonate it. So how to solve the issue of it running away from you? Simple. Using the augment Prism Guard. You can get this from Nightwave or trading with other players. Prism Guard attaches itself to Mirage and moves where you go, so that solves the issue of having it run away. Now, this ability deals radiation damage, however, it does not proc radiation. You have to know that, because there are people in chat who were saying, hey, why don't you use Topaz Shards to increase its damage? Which is a good idea, theoretically. However, you have to realize it has to proc radiation for it to deal more damage to the targets affected by radiation. But what if the targets already die? That leaves the Topaz Shards pretty useless. But then you might say, oh, what if you prime them? Yes, that is also a good idea, but now you're wasting time priming them and then casting your ability. There's a simple solution to that. Just subsume an ability that already does what the Topaz Shards does and has better scaling, bringing us to our Helminth ability, Roar. Roar is a universal damage buff, which affects your weapons and abilities. Now, there are some people who are wondering, oh, why did you replace Eclipse? Unfortunately, you cannot have two damage buffs on the same Warframe, so you can't have Eclipse and Roar. You're forced to remove one or the other. And since Eclipse does not affect Prism, Roar was a perfect candidate for this build. Now, some might be asking, why not Armor Strip? You see, Armor Strip is pretty good, but then there are two AoE Armor Strips, Pillage and Terrify. Pillage requires a lot of strength, 328% strength with Corrosive Projection, which is way too much. And then you have Terrify. Terrify will, of course, have enemies run away from you. It costs a lot of energy to cast, while at the same time, Prism requires a lot of energy to cast. So Roar was the best choice. And Prism does suffer from another issue, being it is one of the slowest abilities to cast, right next to Necros' fourth ability. That's why I am using Matter Eye with Power Transfer and 2 Amber Shards for casting speed, so I can get 100% casting speed. And even that feels a bit too slow. So for those who don't get how casting speed is really important, this is a Mirage without Archon Shards and Natural Talent. Look how long that took. And for people saying, oh, just jump and cast, that doesn't increase your casting speed. That just has you cast it in the air as you're falling. Same animation. And being stuck in the air even longer makes you vulnerable. So yeah, here's the difference. Look at that difference in casting speed. It is night and day. Boom, same animation in the air as well. Nothing changed. You have your Power Transfer, Sling Strength, and the Archon Shards. Boom. Fast. Clean. Way faster. Do not underestimate casting speed on Mirage's fourth ability. Letting animation shine equals death. You don't want death. You want enemy death. I did talk a little bit about Prism's damage scaling, and there is some issues with its damage scaling as well, and some things that you need to avoid. As I said, Prism has startup damage. This startup damage comes from Prism hitting multiple targets at a time, because Prism also deals damage over time, with 0.5 second intervals between each light beam. And what can screw this up is grouping tools. You see, when enemies are grouped up, Prism is not going to have a good time hitting all of those enemies properly. Sometimes it can hit all those enemies nicely, but then there are cases where the Prism just ignores them. And then there's the issue where knocked down enemies don't get hit by Prism. So that's why I would say avoid grouping abilities and even grouping sentinels. So for those thinking about using the Nautilus, well, it can be a bit of an issue. Because Cordon also has another annoying thing. It triggers the vortex on your last position. And this build wants you to move around quite a lot, so it can hit multiple enemies at a time. So Cordon will trigger its vortex on the last position you're at, so it will suck enemies here, but you've already moved on. Now your light beams are not hitting as many enemies as it wants to. All right, here I'm gonna try and use Cordon. Oh, never mind, they died before Cordon even triggered. You know what's sad? Cordon is not even triggering. Oh, it just triggered there, but the enemies are dead. This thing just shreds way too quickly for Cordon to even be useful. So yeah, this is why I would say Cordon is not worth it. Just bring something that's way more useful for you. Ah, you see it did a grouping there, and enemies were not hit by the Prism. Ah, it did another grouping. At least it managed to kill some enemies. This is a very open space, and we have 30 meters default on Prism. So that's why I'll recommend two companions, the Worm and the Panzervopophyla. The Worm is simple. You have Negate for the status cleanse every 5 seconds and easily reduced by Manifold Bond, since this build will use a bit of priming. And then you have Guardian that instantly replenishes your shields, giving you a decent bit of survivability. However, for this particular build, I would suggest this one where you have Negate, Guardian, and Shield Charger, since it's going to be a shield tanking build. And then the Panzervopophyla will spread viral procs to enemies, which further increases Prism damage, because we're using different elements on our primer. And for those thinking, hey, since we're priming enemies, why don't we use something like the Diriga? Good thought, good thought. However, the problem with Diriga is that it's not consistent enough for what you want it to do. But that's why I recommend to have companions that can benefit you in other areas, while you can outsource your priming to your weapons. And the primer in question is, of course, the Epitaph. This Epitaph is modded for corrosive and heat, which is a nice boost in some armor strip. So if you want to see how this build functions in real time, let's go over to the Steel Path. And I came to the Void Tile set just to have a bit more lighting. I can show you how much damage this thing can ramp up. And oh boy, it's going to wipe out everything in sight. And you already know my focus school is Matter Eye, so every 20 seconds you want to perform 2 Void Slings so you can get Power Transfer and Sling Strength. For the homies, we prime to get Growing Power active, Roar, and then boom. Oh, that was kind of loud. You see how fast we wiped these Steel Path enemies? Yeah. Disgusting. Look at these guys. They don't stand a chance. All right. We have our Growing Power, Roar, Power Transfer, Sling Strength, all of that juice. And you want to be always, constantly moving. Do not sit still with this build. Mirage's main survivability is just being on the move, because with her first ability and her passive and some additional parkour velocity, she is really hard to hit. And I got stuck as soon as I said that. So, yeah, always keep on the move. Beautiful. Sometimes I need to have the map overlay so I can see where all the enemies are. And having a large enemy radar is so beneficial for this build because we killed so quickly. Nice. Look at all those enemies disappear on the minimap. So nice. All the red triangles just disappearing one by one. So great. This build can usually hit 120 kills per minute, which is really nice to have. And sometimes it can go even higher depending on the tile set and the amount of enemies, and of course the enemy type. Oh, here comes an Acolyte. Oh, that Eximus. Oh, never mind. Eximus dead. Where's the Acolyte? Look at that. Look at that. That's the Acolyte, by the way. Yeah. Alright, so let's go back to the Orbiter to show you how this build is put together. 5 minutes and we already have 824 kills. We're back in the Orbiter, and if you like big damage, stay tuned for my Citrine and the Sporothrix new augment versus level 9000. And oh boy, it one-shots them so hard that they don't even know what happened. And this is an interesting moment that happened live on stream, where I dealt 540 million damage with that setup. 540 million! So stay tuned for that. Now let's take a look at that Mirage build. The Archon shards, 2 casting speed, and then the rest can be whatever you want. I went with energy maximum, but I would say you can even add a bit more duration with red Tau Forge shards. That will be actually really nice, just to upkeep the duration. Onto the build. In the aura, I have growing power for that 25% bonus strength when I proc a status effect, and that's easily done thanks to my primer, and it's going to have a very high uptime. Prime sure-footed, spending less time on your bunt is a huge DPS increase. If you do not have this, I highly recommend using Pain Threshold. And if you're using duration shards, you could drop Constitution or Augur Message and replace it with Fortitude and run a regular sure-footed. That's the Copium version. Strength at 155% because we have 4 conditional strength boosts. One coming from growing power, 1 from Molt Augmented, 1 from Precision Intensify, which increases my 4th ability damage. Only the 4th ability. So that's 90% strength on my 4th ability, and from Sling Strength. And to counteract the loss in duration from Transient Fortitude, I do have Primed Continuity, Constitution, and Augur Message. We need as much uptime on the Prism, because unfortunately, regular Prism and Prism Guard have different durations. Redirection and Adaptation for our survivability, which is made even better from Guardian from a Sentinel. And finally, Prism Guard, the Augment. And for our sustainability, I'm going to use Arcane Energize. Anyway, folks, that has been it for me. I do hope you've enjoyed and learned something from this video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do it for the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace. Bye-bye now.